It's time for our monthly Tech Talk series where we check in with Swissnex networks around the world. And this time we return to India, where Swissnex recently co-organized a workshop in Bangalore together with the Wadhwani Institute and Swiss think tank Foraus on the subject of AI for good. And Jonas Nakons, he is project lead Policy Kitchen at Foraus, joins us now. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so walk me through a little bit the genesis of this cooperation between Foraus and Swissnex for AI for good.
I will. So the workshop in Bangalore was part of a global initiative that Foraus, Swiss Forum on Foreign Policy, and the Swissnex network did together. The context is kind of ethical principles, the principle of inclusion in the domain of AI. It's not well defined, and we initiated a global series of workshops to brainstorm about this from different corners of the world.
Why is this important?
So AI is truly disruptive technology. As a technology, it's neutral. It can be a force for good or for bad. Now everyone is scrambling a little bit to make policies and guidelines to keep it a force for good. So we've seen the publication of lots of guideline documents from different actors. And we just identified the fact that some of these principles are really ill-defined, and we need new and fresh ideas on how to operationalize them in practice.
Oh, interesting. And as I understand it, Switzerland still does not have a national AI strategy.
Yeah, there's a map by the Future of Life Institute on all countries that have formal AI policies yet, and Switzerland is still a white dot on the map.
Why is that? What's holding it up?
They're at it. I mean, there is a working group now that will publish a report in autumn on the subject. I think it has to do with the fact that Switzerland does not usually have an industrial policy as do countries like China or the US. So they focus on creating framework conditions that will then enable whatever new technology or innovation to thrive.
Okay. So this is something that's important for a country to have, in your opinion?
I think it is important, and I would say it's especially important that this happens in coordination with other actors. What we see currently is that lots of countries and different international fora and civil society groups and industry groups all come up with different guidelines and principles. And I think the main challenge is to not reinvent the wheel, but to kind of do the global coordination of these efforts to achieve some global shared principles.
And we mentioned earlier that one of the partners for this same workshop is the Wadhwani Institute for Artificial Intelligence. Newly opened, more or less. You know, they're just over about a year old. What was your impression of the work that they're doing there?
So my impression was that they're really strong on the ethical aspects of AI. They're using AI as tools to contribute to a more equal and just society. So I think that's one of the great potentials. And I've been told they're one of the key players already in the Indian landscape. They have great talent around Bangalore, especially. So I'm curious what they will come up with next.
How are you using AI? What is a think tank's connection to AI?
Yeah, so as a think tank, we're not really focusing on the technical applications of AI as such. We're mostly interested in the policy ramifications of such new technology, and especially the aspect of multilateral cooperation. And so we're a bottom-up think tank. What we're good at is not really sit in the office and write papers, but convene different stakeholders around a topic to come up with fresh policy proposals that will guide policymakers in their decision-making.
Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, for example, the predecessor campaign of the global one that we're now doing had a focus on the national AI strategy in Switzerland. So we also used Policy Kitchen as kind of a digital ideation tool and a series of workshops with different stakeholders to generate inputs for the working group working on that report. We thought it makes no sense that this is something that happens inside the government only. We are strong defenders of basically a vibrant civil society, and we helped organize the collection of inputs from civil society and other stakeholders. And the physical gatherings of bright minds from different perspectives are a crucial component of that. And so our Open Think Tank network in Europe and the Swissnex network globally just was a great avenue to scale this to a global level, to have physical gatherings in different locations like Bangalore, like Sao Paulo, like Boston, San Francisco, to kind of feed this global conversation.
Thank you, Jonas, so much for joining us.
Thank you,
for your
Anna-Maria.
insights.
It was a pleasure.
It's time now to find out more about Swissnex Network's Indian partner for the AI for Good workshop. They're the Wadhwani Institute for Artificial Intelligence. Founded last year by tech billionaires and philanthropists, brothers Sunil and Ramesh Wadhwani, their research institution aims to harness the power of AI to address challenges in healthcare, agriculture, and job training, among others. We're joined now from Mumbai by the Wadhwani Institute Head of Data Science, Alpan Raval. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's such a pleasure to have you on Tech Talk. So if we look at AI like the space race of the 21st century, where is India on this landscape?
Well, we're certainly behind the US and China. We're somewhat behind Europe as well. But we like to think we're catching up. You know, we're trying to attract the best talent. We're trying to work on interesting problems. Of course, the sort of problems that we work on, we would not be directly competing with the US and China, but we, as an institute, we'd certainly like to work more in the social sphere.
This is where India is putting their efforts then into this concept of AI for good.
That's right. Yeah. So the Indian government is in the process of developing policy for AI. We are involved in that process as well. And we are, I think, the only institute in the world that does AI for social good. We're devoted to AI for social good as a nonprofit institute.
Tell me a little bit about what it is. What does that look like, AI for Good? What is it you're working on?
Well, we're working on a number of projects. For example, one of the projects for which we got a Google grant is doing pest management in cotton farms. Cotton sadly consumes 50% of India's pesticides, and often there's a lot of indiscriminate spraying. So we use AI to figure out the optimal time to spray pesticide, and thus both conserve the use of pesticide as well as make pesticides a lot more effective. That's one of the projects. We're also working on neonatal healthcare. So one of the big problems out there is taking accurate measurements of newborn babies, measurements like weight, head circumference, and so on, which are very important health indicators. And we use AI to take these measurements accurately. So, for example, we're developing technology where we can take a picture or a video of a newborn baby and infer its weight.
You can weigh a baby through a photo? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we call it a virtual weighing machine.
Wow, I mean that's pretty. That sounds pretty impressive, I have to say. And this is working already.
This is working in initial tests. We have yet to do field tests of the technology, make sure it's robust, make sure it works in adverse conditions, when the mobile phone is used by healthcare workers and so on. So we have yet to do field tests, but in our internal tests, it seems to work pretty well.
Okay. All right, so this is the way in which India hopes to close this gap, is by filling in this space. Is this possible? Do you think it's really possible that India could catch up just by doing this?
Well, we're very hopeful. This is just one of the examples, and we are a relatively new institute. We're just a year old. So we want to develop solutions that scale to the developing world at large. And India has problems that are sort of representative of the developing world. We have a huge rural population. We have a significant population that's below poverty lines. And technology really hasn't reached a lot of this population, and we're hoping to bridge that gap through intelligent use of AI.
So talk to me about the Wadhwani Institute. It's about a year old, as we know, founded by the Wadhwani brothers, Sunil and Ramesh. with about $30 million out of their own pocket. How does this business model move forward?
Well, it's not really a business model. So we have an initial seed endowment from the Wadhwani brothers, and we're building on that endowment. We also seek grant funding from other agencies, including agencies run by the Indian government, as well as the Gates Foundation.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about this workshop that you've just collaborated with Swissnex Network in Bangalore, again, around this idea of AI for good and inclusion and et cetera in the future. How did this come about, and what did you hope to get out of this?
Yeah, so this was a Swissnex, a jointly organized workshop between Swissnex and us and the Wadhwani Institute. And the idea was really to figure out what inclusiveness means in the context of both AI for good, as well as in the context of AI for the developing world.
And why is this
developing world
important? Sorry, excuse me, Alpan. Why is this important? This inclusion.
I think it's important because the developing world comes with its own challenges, not just in terms of rolling out tech, implementing tech, but also in terms of the way people understand the role of tech in society, right? So for example, one of the big themes in AI for social good is the theme of explainability, which is the idea that you want to explain what AI is doing, why AI takes the decisions that it does, and in terms of inclusion, we would like to make sure that these explanations are not just centered in the Western world, that they are amenable to people in the developing world as well. Mm-hmm. So it's important that people understand not just how to use the technology, but where it comes from and what its limitations are within their own context.
And what other challenges are you grappling with at the moment in terms of AI?
A number of challenges. So scale is a challenge. Everything we build has to scale, and that presents a huge challenge in building out technology. Robustness is a challenge. Anything that we build has to function in varied environments, has to function within limitations. For example, the smartphones on which we're likely to deploy our solutions are going to be extremely basic. And so any apps that we build or enable will have to be apps that fit on very basic smartphones. That's another challenge. And then adoption is always a challenge that, it's something that we're going to face going forward.
What about labor? I mean, there's so much skilled labor that comes from India, but eventually ends up elsewhere. I mean, you were a perfect example of this, right? You were in the States for many years before returning to India.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word labor, but yeah, that's right.
What would you use?
Have a huge. Well, I would say there's a brain drain problem. Okay. We have, we have the raw talent in India. A lot of that talent ends up being trained abroad eventually, and then they end up staying outside India, mostly in the West. Okay. It's a hard problem to attract them back, and we hope to do our bit by offering the right set of challenges.
What brought you back, for example?
It was just the promise of economic opportunity. India is changing extremely rapidly. It's still a developing country, but it's changing very fast. I think the amount of change I see in India within a 2 to 3 year time span is far more than the change one would see in the US, for example, or in Europe. So it's progressing very rapidly. There's economic opportunity, the challenging problems. People want to work on challenging problems. So it's a very interesting time to be in India. It's a very interesting environment.
So if I am a Swiss developer of AI, what would you say to me about India? Would you say, come on in, come on over? How would you? What would you say to me? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say come and work with us. We're open to all kinds all kinds of engagement models. We're open to models where you can come and live in India, experience what it's like, and work with us. You could work remotely and come in once in a while to see the impact that your work makes.
And can you get funding in
all
India?
kinds of models.
Sorry, can you get funding in India?
Well, we get funding from all over the world, so not just from India. But the Indian government has also been extremely supportive.
Okay, and to finish up then, the Wadhwani Institute for Artificial Intelligence aims to address the ethical dimensions of AI research and implementation. How far along is this conversation of ethics in India, in AI?
It's not very far along, both in India as a country, as well as for us as an institute. That's a goal. That's definitely a goal for us, but we expect to face these issues and these challenges more when our solutions get deployed, right? As I mentioned earlier, we're still a new institute. Some of these challenges we anticipate, but we're not grappling with them yet.
Now you've got this Google grant, $2 million. Congratulations. What's next? What's in the pipeline?
Well, we're going to expand for sure. We want to expand to at least 3 or 4 times the size that we are right now. We want to be involved in more and more solutions. There's many people who reach out to us. There's many agencies. There's many problems to solve. So definitely in the solution space, we'd like to expand a lot more. We also aim to expand in terms of basic research in AI.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Tech Talk. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you, Anna.